Adam Belz is the co-founder and host of the Scuffed podcast, the premier podcast covering the U.S. men's national team. He's a recovering newspaper reporter, not the only one in this interview, with rich insight into USMNT news, tactics, and soon its World Cup matchups. And we'll get into the draw today. But first, Adam, thanks for joining us. We want to get into the flashpoint for folks here in Nashville, the moment that Anibal Godoy took down Walker Zimmerman in the box. Was it a penalty in your view? I think it seemed pretty clear to us. And just from an outsider's perspective, did it resonate that it was two Nashville guys going at it in that pivotal play, or more just about the significance of that moment for the U.S.?
I didn't, that was not my first thought, but it is. I am interested in like what their relationship is in Nashville, whether they're buddies or not. But my first thought was like, what the hell is, can I say that? What the hell is,
say whatever,
is Anibal Godoy doing? Like, why is he doing that? Repeatedly, like I thought he fouled him like 3 times on the sequence, and then maybe he could have been whistled for a handball. Mm-hmm. And then he did it again.
I thought the handball was going to be what actually ended up getting the call in the end there.
Yeah. So I don't know. Matt Doyle, the MLS guy, made the point that maybe he's so used to doing that without VAR, without video review, that like, this new regime of video review kind of caught him by surprise. And that's why he was doing what he usually does. Now there's this new video review, and that caught him finally. I don't know, man. It seemed crazy that he was doing that to me.
Yep. I guess from a broader perspective, since we obviously we'll talk a little bit more about Walker, but Godoy in the 2 games against the United States, what did you see out of him? Did you kind of, see the guy who, I understand why this guy's the Panama captain, and other than making some really boneheaded decisions in that moment, we understand what sort of player and why he is such a crucial player for an MLS team.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like every time I watch Godoy play, I like what I see. He's big, he's physical, he's technical. I guess he hasn't been that great in the, final third for Panama in these games. I mean, I guess he was the closest to the own goal in the game in the fall, but he didn't really have anything to do with it. Yeah. But the way he kind of controls the middle of the park is, I think, is really good. It feels to me like he's sort of underrated overall. I don't know. Yeah. I like Godoy. I like Godoy.
It's nice to hear after 2+ years of people saying that that Nashville overpaid to get him from San Jose. Underrated. We would tend to agree, I think.
Is that your guys' kind of consensus on him?
Yeah, I think from an MLS perspective, he's the sort of guy who, if he was an American, he would be the sort of guy who we'd be saying, okay, should he be called up over like a Kellen Acosta type? Obviously, he's like 32 years old, so it's a little bit different. But I think he's the sort of guy that the MLS guys, Doyle would be all over him if he was an American and saying, hey, call this guy up, call this guy up. For a country like Panama, which obviously has much less depth than we do, it makes sense for him to be kind of their almost locked in captain. He would not be that for the United States, obviously. I wonder if he were American, would he be the sort of guy who maybe would have moved to Europe by now? And the fact that he's Panamanian probably means that there's not as much interest from those sorts of teams.
Yeah, that's too bad if that's the case. It probably is.
I think he's very happy in the United States, though. Like extremely happy. Like for guys who come out of Central America and settle in the United States and are like, oh, this actually rocks. I'm getting paid a lot. I'm happy here,
Does he get seen? Do you guys see him around town a lot? Or
he lives out in the burbs.
Pretty quiet?
He lives out in the burbs. It has like 3 kids, I think. So he's a family man at this stage. He's a regular Adam Belz over
there. And he and Walker do seem to have a good constructive relationship. I think Anibal was interviewed before the U.S. and Panama played, and he said, we're friends, we're teammates. On that day, of course, we are enemies. But we did not anticipate they would be such direct enemies in that moment. and Anibal perhaps his own worst enemy against the United States. I wanted to ask you about the other side of that equation and Walker. I think here in Nashville, we've seen him get 2 consecutive Defender of the Year awards. We've seen him contribute on both sides of the pitch, and there's been a bit of surprise that he was for a while a fringe member of this national team, and he wasn't in the lineup in Nashville when the U.S. hosted Canada, nor when the U.S. visited Canada. And More recently, he seems to have really solidified his position, barring health issues, on that World Cup roster and perhaps in that starting 11. What is the impression from an outside Nashville perspective of Walker's ascendancy? Do you believe he's grown into this team, or do you believe that Greg Berhalter has come around to maybe what already existed in Walker's skill set?
I guess I would sort of favor the latter more than the former. I'd be interested in what you guys have to say about that. Like, has he leveled up his game? Tim and I talk a lot. I see Tim talking a lot on the online, and I haven't seen you like dunking on anybody or, gloating in the fact that Walker is now sort of a locked in starter.
I was sort of a Walker skeptic to
Okay.
start. Not that I thought he wasn't a good MLS player, but like, shoe-in 2-time defender of the year seemed extreme to me. I do think he's leveled up though. I think that's probably fair to say.
Okay.
The passing is never going to be John Brooks like. To give a little shout out to Greg Velasquez here, who's I think is still losing his mind over still no Brooks in the lineup. But the athletic side of things and even pushing forward with the ball at his feet, I think are night and day different from when he joined Nashville right before the 2020 season.
I think he's a better passer than Miles Robinson,
Yeah.
like hitting a pass between the lines to find somebody's feet. But yeah, that athleticism, that absolute dominance in the air is, man, it's hard to overstate how valuable that is. I feel like, especially because we have a couple of younger center backs, Mark McKenzie and Chris Richards, who aren't so good in the air. And just to have, Thor flying through the sky and just thumping the ball away anytime it's
Mjolnir,
played back there.
What
is it?
Mjolnir, I think, something like that.
Yeah, my Norse mythology is pretty.
I'm out.
Yeah.
We joke actually on the air on Nashville SC radio broadcast that he's found a way to install like magnets somewhere in his hair to track the ball to his head. He has this uncanny ability to position himself well, but then repel the ball back into the net with some force. It's been fun to see him grow into this team and into Nashville SC as well. He talked after the draw about his excitement of getting to face Harry Kane. He was asked if there's one player you want to go up against that you want to try to shut down, and he was very humble about it, but he said, that's the guy you watch, right? And he's going to be there for England. He's going to be the talisman. We know we're going to have to face him. I'm eager to shut him down. Other than Harry, is there a player in that draw, again, Scotland/Ukraine/Wales, Iran, England, who you're most excited to see the U.S. men's national team go against and attempt to either shut down or circumnavigate?
We're going to record our Monday episode later this morning, so I've been digging in a little bit on Iran, and they have some good big strikers. Tourami, I think, is the guy who plays for Porto, and then Azmoun plays for Bayer Leverkusen. He was just on loan to Zenit St. Petersburg, so he was playing. He played in Champions League, scored a couple of goals in the Champions League group stage, even though Zenit didn't go very far. Those are two really good players that I think most people probably aren't tracking that closely.
Mm-hmm.
The one at Porto, he's got like 14 goals already this season. Like he's banging in goals, and so I think that's gonna be a fun matchup, particularly for Walker, because they're both sizable players and good too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing about Walker. You mentioned him. You just said he said this after the draw that he was excited to play Harry Kane, and I feel like, aside from the like him leveling up and him being so good in the air and just being like a physical presence, I think he was a much needed sort of forceful personality on the national team, because without him, John Brooks is a great player, and hopefully I would like to see him back with the national team at some point, but he's sort of a retiring personality. He's not like shouting at everybody, getting everybody pumped up. And I think it was important for this very young team to have a guy like Walker come in and just be like dad for a little bit. I'm biased towards dads, but
this is the dad podcast, just FYI. So no shame in
dad
that.
cast.
Yeah. Do you think, whether it's because of those characteristics or some of the other stuff that he provides, that he's basically played himself into being a Qatar lock at this stage?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I would say I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think I would put him as number one center back on the depth chart at the moment. Miles probably second, and then the third and fourth is a little bit up in the air at this point. Chris Richards just got back from injury yesterday, and we'll see. I hope he does. I hope he does really well the rest of the season, the beginning of the next season, and is called up. I like him a lot. But he's not as dominant in the air. He's got a different skill set, and I think Zimmerman Brooks would be a really good pairing. As long as we're not playing a super fast team and like not totally like pushing up high. I think that Zimmerman's pace is okay, but he could still get exposed, and Brooks's pace is not okay, and he will get exposed. So I like that. I like that pairing those two together.
When you look at, I guess, going forward over the rest of this European season and kind of halfway through the domestic American season, there's going to be the Nations League and friendly window coming up. How much do you think that those games are going to affect what the player pool ends up looking like come November? Or do you think that it's mostly about, I think what I think we saw in Costa Rica, which is getting reps for the guys who are going to be as much of the first 11 as possible, and hoping to get those guys comfortable with each other, even if they're really tired and played kind of horribly after 30 minutes.
Right. I think it's going to be more about getting reps for the core team. I mean, that's been one of our criticisms of Berhalter, is that he hasn't done enough to bring in new talent and get a look at it. He's stuck with guys for a long time. I feels like that's not going to change now. We're 8 months away. We got 6 games to play before the World Cup. I feel like it seems like kind of unlikely that John Brooks would even make it back in at this point to me. But yeah, what do I know?
Well, do you think a guy like Brooks could be like, those extra 3 in an expansion from 23 to 26 and say, okay, now we need those line breaking passes. This is an opportunity to slot him in as kind of a bonus spot
on paper. Yeah. But if the issue is that there's some personality conflict, which who knows? Yeah. Then no. When do you guys think Walker Zimmerman did the leveling up?
I would say probably over the course of his first year in Nashville. He went from, this is a guy who's a really good offensive threat on set pieces, especially, and a guy who's an above average defender. That's obviously an above average defender domestically in MLS is not a U.S. men's national team player. Somewhere over the course of possibly even, during the 3 or 4 months where nothing really happened, except for the guys were able to train for the last maybe month before getting back on the field. I think you could say he developed his ball work quite a bit then. I actually think he's a plus athlete. He's not going to be Chris Richards probably, but I think he's not an elite athlete at the international level, as loaded a term as at the international level can be, as we know. But I think he's a plus athlete at that level, and that's something that he's kind of figured out how to show a little bit more in soccer ways rather than just in athlete ways, probably.
Yeah,
I think that probably happened, August or September of 2020.
I would agree. I think it came from Nashville facing so much pressure because in that first year they were very much a defensive backbone squad who would score when they had the opportunity, but they were facing a lot of pressure, and I think that enabled him probably to hone the mental side of his game as well, right? I think the biggest growth area I see from him, you mentioned he's always had that athleticism. I think it's the positioning, right? It's knowing where to be and how to fend off sustained attacks, and I think he gained that skill. Tim, I would agree completely with your timeline. August, September, as the team tried to grow from being a defense-only squad really to being a little more of an attacking juggernaut, and he certainly helped on that end as well, on set pieces, as he's always been known to be able to do.
August or September of 2020.
2020,
yeah. I think I said last year.
So it's not, I think maybe one of the reasons you're asking is because he was left off that October roster, I want to say. He was an unused sub in all 3 games in the September window. I think by that point, he was basically the player that he is now. You talked about how maybe personality conflict between Brooks and Berhalter is potentially an issue for Berhalter. I would say maybe the opportunity to see Walker's personality and see that he kind of is this raw leadership sort of guy that you wouldn't see unless he gets on the field might be a kind of a switch flipping moment for a coach, kind of saying, okay, now I get why this is a guy who is the leader of a back line that is so elite in MLS, why he's, a captain when Dax McCarty isn't the captain. Those sorts of things, I think maybe the US staff got a chance to see only in game action and kind of came around from that perspective.
Yeah, because he seems like he feels 100% comfortable in the national team now. Maybe didn't back then. Maybe didn't feel like he totally belonged, but you can tell he feels like he belongs now.
Yeah,
and he does. And he does.
And it's only fed into his club performance as well. I think you've seen that reverberate as he comes back from these international breaks where he's been so effective. Some guys might be wearied by that, and you see this weird duality of some guys not having that confidence carry over. It does for him. I think that's fair to say that he's continued to be strong in Nashville, not just skating by on his reputation. We would think he earned both of those Defender of the Year awards in Major League Soccer, especially maybe that second year.
So from a Scuffed perspective, to take it from Walker specifically into what we're going to see in the next 7 months here or so, what does your preparation look like? Do you and Greg sit down and watch every Iran game from AFC qualifying? Do you guys sit down and watch club games from some of these guys and figure out what the players are like? How do you do that? How do you kind of get familiar with Iran and England and maybe all three of Ukraine, Scotland, and Wales before you kind of record your episodes and prepare the fans for what they're going to see?
Well, I mean, Greg's deeper in the tape than I am for sure. I don't know exactly his process. The man is a mystery, but
shouting into the front of his TV is always
right. But what I do is I go on Y Scout, like what I did yesterday. I go on Y Scout and I just pull up like the Iran national team's games. They're not the full games, but like the stats on their games, and then you can watch like every shot they attempted in the game against Lebanon, every shot they attempted against South Korea, every shot that was attempted against them. So that's like my first stop, is to go there. And then, I'm like, ooh, that player looks really good. What's he doing at the club level? And then you can do this sort of the same thing with him at the club level. That's how I'm getting started. We have a lot of work to do to sort of figure out what our plan is over the next 8 months. I mean, it was all about qualifying for the World Cup and, sort of pushing for that in our little way. And now we got some planning to do and figuring stuff out. So I don't know exactly what the plan is.
A lot less tailgate planning coming up though, right?
Yes. Yeah. The tailgates are, we're trying to do something at least in one of the two windows that's coming up, but we'll see.
So as you look forward to what's coming up, among Scotland, Ukraine, and Wales, and among with research you've done and having watched these guys throughout European qualifying, do one of those offer, in your opinion, the most favorable matchup for the U.S. to the extent that you can project that this far out?
Man, I have to admit I don't know the answer to that question, but my Ukraine always, I mean, take the geopolitics out of it for a second. Ukraine, I feel like is always a tough opponent, like really disciplined and difficult to play against. And I know people think of Gareth Bale as a big problem for Wales. I'm not sure that's really the issue, or Aaron Ramsey. These guys are getting a little old. So I think I kind of rather face one of the UK teams than Ukraine, but that's just me talking out of my butt right now.
It's scenes against England too, though. It definitely gives some storylines here.
Yeah. No, that I've always wanted that, just because not because I'm confident we're going to win. I just think the opportunity for like joy in beating them is so high. It's worth
I still remember where I watched the 2010 group stage game against England. It was Original Gravity Brewing in Milan, Michigan. Sponsor the pod, guys.
Is Milan, Michigan in the Grand Rapids area, or
it is like just south of Ann Arbor.
Oh, okay. So, south of Ann Arbor. All right. Yeah, I think I was in my apartment in Des Moines. Go Blue.
Yeah, I was in my basement in Knoxville, I believe, which was my apartment. It was a very dark, dim place, but not that day. That was a pretty good day for the U.S. The 98 matchup with Iran, not so much. Don't remember where I was for that, but
I was definitely not a soccer fan then.
I was.
I wasn't as much of a soccer fan then.
Was that? Yeah,
That's
I was
fair.
not. I
That's
was
fair.
not going to go out and like seek out games on TV. At least at that point, I should say.
Yeah, couldn't have told you a single tactical nugget from that game, but it was ugly on and off the pitch for the U.S. What about the order that these guys are coming in? It's going to be, Scotland, Ukraine, Wales first, then England, then Iran. Does that work well for you? Would you prefer to open with an Iran where you feel like the world rankings at least would suggest maybe the U.S. would be a favorite there, or do you prefer to open with England before maybe such a talented group gained full chemistry, or do you care because these are all hypotheticals and the order is set?
I think I like the order of it.
Yeah.
My sense is that the first opponent that first game is gonna be the easiest of the three. I know Iran's ranked lower than us, but Qatar is like a 1 hour flight from Shiraz, like a big city in Iran. I was just like looking this up. Iran's a nation of 85 million people. It's a ton of people there.
Yeah.
1 in every 100 humans in the world is Iranian. It's I think that's going to be an away game for us, or going to feel like an away game. So I like to maybe have presumably the easiest game first, and then try to get a result against England, and then just see what happens in the final game. I mean, we can beat Iran on our day. I think. I'm not trying to say that we can't, but I don't know. They're all going to be really hard games. They're all going to be. I mean, soccer's such a crapshoot. Let's just do it. Let's just do it.
Just glad to be there at this point. And by November, I
totally
won't be
glad
ready,
to be there.
But...
And I'm glad the England game is on Black Friday, because that's going to get get a bigger television audience.
Yeah.
And if we do beat them and do it in a way that's like fun to watch, that could be like huge for the sport in this country, I think.
Yeah, I was looking forward to a potential like 11 a.m. Thanksgiving game, but this is probably better, especially now that your beloved Iowa Hawkeyes no longer play Nebraska on Black Friday every year. They play on Saturday now.
Somewhat beloved. Yeah.
Any acapella songs coming up over the next few months here? I guess it's got something in the works in the lab over here.
No, yeah. I mean, I have sort of the unpublished Serginho Dest song, which hasn't been right to put out yet because he was hurt for this window. Yeah. I have mixed feelings about my acapella output. Some people like it, some people don't. I don't know. We'll see if the spirit moves again.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you wish we had asked you, or anything that you want to ask us about? I know you're a big proponent of that question. So.
I do. I ask that question a lot. So Nashville, like, what's the expectation in Nashville this year? I mean, the playoffs are much like the World Cup, a crapshoot. But what are you guys feeling like would be a successful season, and what would be a disappointment?
I think there are two tiers of expectations. Number one, I think supporters look at what's happened the past 2 years and say a top 4 finish in the West is a reasonable objective for this team. And I think the way they've started in their massive 8-match road swing lends some optimism. Beating teams like Columbus and Seattle on the road suggests that perhaps that grind won't be too much and overcome them early on. But I think also it is tempered by the reality that is a tough stretch, and it's quite possible that these next 3 matches, even you go to San Jose, you're worn down, the man marking is hit or miss, and maybe it hits that day, and you don't end up with as many points as you want. And then, what does that do to the identity of your team and the psychology of your team? So I think if Nashville can take another win or take even another couple points in their final 3 of this road trip, then you're looking at half your road games gone. You're at home. You don't go on the road for more than 1 match the rest of the year. There are no more road stretches. And I think then there's significant optimism that it's a top 4 team. As far as the club goes, I think they'd just be happy to get to the playoffs, and they know how much of a crapshoot the playoffs, will be after that. So first year in the West, the travel's going to add up at some point here in this stretch. And I think generally, though, optimism, excitement, Tim?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say supporters aren't necessarily getting restless, but I think after 2 years that exceeded expectations, there will be people who are disappointed if there isn't some kind of silverware. Now, that could just be like a U.S. Open Cup. It could be a Supporters Shield. I think that would be pretty unlikely. It could be even just a run to like the Western Conference final. I think people need to see some sort of tangible outcome of positive results. Being good but not great is kind of malaise can set in from there, especially in pro sports where like every year feels the same. There's not like the urgency of college sports, which is part of what I like about college sports as well too. But
Yeah.
I think people really want to see that sort of thing. Otherwise, they'll start to say, okay, this is a team that frankly hasn't captured Nashville like Charlotte FC has captured Charlotte. Wes and I, past 2 weekends have each gone to a Charlotte FC game. And I was blown away how much more they are beloved by their city than Nashville SC is. And some of that is just kind of weird, coincidence. Some of it is location, like the area around Charlotte FC, since they play at Bank of America, is like you're 15 yards from a really cool like business district, whereas in Nashville, as you experience at that qualifier, you have to walk across a bridge, and yes, you're in Broadway, but it's like you're just in a tourist district. It's a very different feel. People from Nashville don't go down to Broadway really, unlike what it seems like people from Charlotte would probably do going down to the area down there around B of A. So I don't know, it's an interesting situation for Nashville. So we'll see exactly how they capitalize on it when they have their own stadium. I think that's going to be a big deal. In the recent past, teams moving into their own stadium hasn't been awesome. Columbus was like mediocre in their new stadium last year, so we'll see.
When is I know this is from the Department of Easily Googleable Questions, but when is the stadium opening?
May 1st.
May 1st.
Okay.
Philadelphia Union.
Cool.
And it's going to be
Come
it's
up there
going to
for
be
that. It's not
great.
that far.
Come on up, and let us know if you do. We'll buy you a beer at ML Rose, our favorite burger and bourbon bar that also happens to sponsor this podcast.
See, we're much better shills than you and Greg are.
I'm a PR guy in my day job, so shameless. It comes easily for sure. And I'll push back a little on the Charlotte distinction. I not that I wasn't just as impressed as Tim was with what's happening over there, but I think Nashville's first year was the growth was stunted a bit by the pandemic. I mean, added to the list of myriad things that were impacted. And this one, of course, relatively minor by comparison. But, that first game, they get, 60,000 plus fans at Nissan Stadium to play Atlanta. To me, if they had a chance to play at home again 2, 3, 4 times, in good weather in the spring in Nashville, they probably get crowds comparable to what Charlotte is getting now, after that first game, so 30,000 or so, and you have a chance to really write your history with the supporters a little bit. Now Nashville has looked to the stadium to kind of be that catalyst, and I think it will be. I think the district around it's going to be great as they build that up, and it'll definitely be a place you'll want to drive up since you're not far away to check out.
All right. I was going to ask one other thing, I was going to say the on-field product is like, as far as expansion clubs go, it's top tier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's so it's weird that it's not.
So one of the things is the way that they did it was, until you see them play, it doesn't come across as sexy. Like nobody's going to be as excited about CJ Sapong as they are about Joseph Martinez, no matter how many goals each of them scores. Unsexy, but effective, certainly in the first year, probably a little bit less so in the past 2 years. Kind of tempered expectations, and maybe unfairly. I think the expectations were unnaturally suppressed, maybe. But yeah, it's a situation where probably people, should have been more excited because it was people who knew what they were doing, building a team, rather than people saying, okay, let's go get, these grab bag pieces, and if it works out, we'll look awesome. And if it doesn't, that's probably what the baseline expectation was.
I think it's cool to have a team. I mean, I'm not sure how much the reputation fits anymore, but cool to have a team that everybody knows they're like defensively solid. They're going to hit you on the counter. They're going to, stay compact and be disciplined. I think it's cool to have a team with that very clear identity. Cause I don't know how many others are there like that in MLS.
Not a lot. Like maybe Portland is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Columbus has a bit of a reputation for that, although they've been a little bit less like that under Porter, although he's the one who gave the Timbers the reputation for doing that. So.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the beauty of it too is it's a well-earned reputation when they go away from home. But last year they were one of the brightest attacking teams at home as well, and part of it was that they were getting that done on the counter still. But they were able to develop some rhythm, and so I think teams that expect Nashville to only be a team that bunkers, the reputation worked in Nashville's favor because it deceived some teams into getting a little complacent and dedicating numbers forward. and then finding themselves very exposed in the back. So that's the key really for growth, right? In year 3. I think silverware, Tim says it, and yeah, we're hearing that here. It's still a ridiculous expectation for most expansion clubs in their third seasons that aren't LA and that aren't Atlanta. And so to be in a place where we're even talking about that as something fans not only want, but tend to expect this year, I think points to how strong this club has been in its first 3 seasons.
Awesome.
Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And folks, while we've got Adam, want to encourage you, check out Scuffed. It is an awesome podcast. I actually was driving in North Carolina from Charlotte to a work event here recently and listened to your quite literally minute by minute breakdown. This was the Mexico match, and it was tremendous.
Should we get into the timeline?
The timeline is great. So it's a great way to hear these things, but don't think wonky tactical. It's still very accessible too for those who are a little new to the game and trying to learn it. It's a great way to pick up what's happening. They go deep, but they don't go so deep that you're going to need to sit down by the side of the road and take notes. It's a great balance. So,
Thanks, Wes.
Adam, cheers, and thanks for spending time with us today.
My pleasure.